Did you want to tell us a little bit about yourself?
Yeah, sure. So I'm Yoshi. My full name is Yoshinari Yoshida. I'm international PhD student from Japan. I'm now doing PhD. I'm now a PhD candidate in philosophy department at the University of Minnesota, and studying general philosophy of science and philosophy of biology.
All right. So what got you interested in philosophy of science and then biology specifically?
Yeah, so actually, when I was a kid, I was interested in biology and not so much in philosophy. So I would say originally my interest was in science, in particular biology. And when I was in high school, I was seriously thinking choosing biology as my career, but I was not very sure because I thought I was interested also in some theoretical questions, or I may say philosophical questions concerning biology.
Right.
So I didn't really know what I should do. And then in my undergrad, I found and took some courses on history of science and philosophy of science. Before that, I didn't know there are such fields, but I took these courses and these were very exciting to me. And I thought, oh, like by majoring these philosophy of science or history of science, I can do uh, what I'm really interested in, namely some philosophical or theoretical considerations concerning science, and I can pick biology. So yeah, I think these undergraduate courses that I took led me to choose my major.
Had you explored other branches within philosophy or were you pretty set on phil sci?
I would say the latter. Yeah, I was really sad because, as I said, originally my interest was in more in science and biology, and so philosophical areas that are not about science were not my, what can I say, main focus.
Okay, awesome.
So I learned, of course, since then, I've learned different branches of philosophy like epistemology, metaphysics, ethics. But these were all after I decided to major philosophy of science. And of course, I've enjoyed learning these branches, but that's the order. Yeah.
Okay, perfect. So I actually have a question about your paper called Multiple Model Systems and Representation of Biological Phenomena. So I was curious, what are the harms of representing biological phenomena through a single biological system? And are there any benefits to doing so?
Yeah, good. So I may start by saying one thing about benefits. So one important benefit of using a single model system is concerns the cost. It is often costly to establish a new model system in biological research. And so I think if biologists can rely on a single model system to learn about a phenomenon, that would be great to them. But there are problems. One major problem is that, and actually this is well recognized by biologists and philosophers. One important problem is that biological phenomena are often generated by diverse mechanisms. So if you stick to just a single model system, there is a risk of overgeneralization. Like Actually, it occurs through diverse processes, but you focus only on a single model system, and you believe that it is kind of homogeneous. So that's a problem. And in my paper, I examine how multiple model systems are used in combination to explore the diversity underlying a single biological phenomenon.
Great. How did you get into this topic, or what inspired you to write this paper?
Yeah, so generalization has been my main interest in philosophy since my undergrad. Or I may say I've been interested in how biologists explore generality and diversity existing in the world. And yeah, use of those biological model systems is a common way to examine biological mechanisms now in experimental biology. So actually, it is a chapter. It will become a chapter of my dissertation, which focuses on scientific generalizations. And yeah, I think so. What I mean is this is one way I approach this broader question of how biologists explore generality and diversity in the world.
For your dissertation, do you talk about specific biological phenomena systems, or do you talk more in general about the benefits of representing them through a single system?
So my dissertation will focus on the field of developmental biology. So it will not talk about other fields, but it focuses on this single field. And I would say some chapters talk about more or less generally, like generally about this field, developmental biology, and other chapters focus on specific phenomenon or research area. So this chapter on which my manuscript is based will focus on, or it focuses on the phenomenon called collective cell migration, which is widely studied in developmental biology in the last few decades. And another chapter focuses on another phenomenon called branching morphogenesis. So something like that. Yeah.
Yeah, that's a really great answer. Just one follow-up on the paper before I move on. What do you think the benefits are if people accept your dissertation and do start trying to represent these systems as a single system instead of multiple?
Yeah.
Or another way of phrasing that would be like, what do you hope to achieve with people read your dissertation?
Good. Yeah, that's a great and a kind of a difficult question too. Let me.
Yes. Sorry, I know I didn't prepare that one.
No. So to philosophers, I'm hoping that my research suggests that, how can I say? My research suggests that, so historically speaking, philosophers of science had some interest in generalizations, but it was a very specific and kind of narrow interest. They talked mostly about laws of nature, which are universal generalizations. And what I want to point out in my dissertation is that actually, well, philosophers can pay more attention to practices of generalizations. how scientists actually work on generalizations in their research practices. And that's something I want to contribute. Like, look, there are other, there are things that that need more philosophical attention. So that's a philosophical contribution I'm hoping. To biologists, this might be more difficult question. So, well, first, I'm interested in how biologists will react to my thesis. I've talked with some biologist friends about my research, but I think I'm interested in how like wider audience will react. And one thing I hope is that my thesis or my research helps them clarify what they are doing at the conceptual level. Because yeah, I think there are cases, historical cases, where philosophical theorization helped scientists recognize and clarify how scientific reasoning or scientific methodologies work. So that's something I'm hoping to achieve. Does it help? I don't know whether these are good answers to your question.
I think that's great, actually. I think you've given a really good answer of like what you want it to achieve, both in the philosophical of like science community as well as a more general audience.
Good.
So, and now to more questions about you personally. So I know you did your bachelor's and your master's in Japan and then came over here to study and work on your PhD. So can you tell me a little bit more about, you know, the differences between maybe here in America or in education systems and philosophy specifically?
Yeah, sure. So one interesting thing I noticed was that how students are supposed to read philosophical text. So in Japan, it is very common to focus on, to spend much time on reading very short text, philosophical text. So there are courses like one course does not finish reading even a single book. So students have to take multiple courses to finish reading a single philosophical book. On the other hand, in the US, as far as I know, the focus is more on, well, so the practice is something like students are supposed to read a lot and read fast. And it seems to me that the focus is more on developing some framework or grasping the landscape of the philosophical area by reading a lot and reading fast. That's something I noticed, like one difference I noticed. And I think both strategies have good points and bad points. Sorry, and I think I'm it was beneficial for me to learn in these different styles, because I can switch, I can recognize advantages and disadvantages of these, and I can switch from one to another depending on my purpose.
Do you have a preference for one or the other, or are there certain kinds of situations that one is better than the other?
Yeah, so currently I'm feeling for beginners, or like early stages, the US style might be better, because like spending effort to interpret a single sentence is great, but interpretation often requires some framework, and the framework has to be achieved through like seeing more broadly the field. So yeah, I don't know, maybe in the future I may change my mind, but currently I'm thinking for beginners, the US style reading different specific area or context, it is very important to spend much time to interpret each sentence. Yeah. You are muted.
Sorry about that.
Okay.
I did have another question for you, and this is just in general about your writing process. So how do you go about, coming up with an idea and then getting it into the final stages of development?
Yeah, so I think this is nothing special, but well, one thing I like is at the early stage of writing, I use visual representations a lot. So I draw diagrams or things like conceptual maps to clarify or organize my thought. I spend much time in doing it. And once I roughly figure out what I want to say, I write the first draft. And writing the first draft itself takes much time. I'm a slow writer, but I spend even more time for revision. So I ask my advisor and my fellow graduate students to read and comment on my draft and then revise. And I do it multiple times, repeatedly. And it is often the case that the framing of the paper I finally adopt is somewhat different from the framing I choose for my first draft.
Yeah, I definitely feel that a lot of people start off with some idea, and then as they go through the drafts and talk with other people, like advisors or other graduate students, they definitely change their ideas.
Mm-hmm.
Even sometimes coming to just like a completely different conclusion at the end.
Yeah, and even if the core idea is the same, changing how I present the idea can improve the paper a lot. Yeah, that's the usual writing process that I take.
Definitely. I really like your idea about drawing out or writing out concept maps to get you started. I was wondering if you had any other sort of tips like that for students or things that you found useful in any of the writing process or just in philosophy of science in general.
Yeah, so about writing process, again, I don't think this is super special, but one thing I think really important is to use other people to write a paper. So as I said, I usually go through multiple rounds of revision. So I write my first draft, ask my advisor and fellow grad students to read and comment on it. And based on the comments, I revise the draft a lot. And then after a while, I again ask my advisor and fellow grad students to read and comment on it. And also earlier in the writing process, I love chatting with my advisor and other grad students. That really helps me clarify and organize my thought to start writing. And yeah, so I think many people already recognize the importance of like relying on other people, but sometimes philosophy is seen as like individualistic, isolated process, and I prefer a view of philosophy more kind of collective. I can do my research through like I rely on interacting with working scientists. I have taken some seminars, biology seminars, and I've spent 1 year to do experimental work. That was when I was in Japan, so I was doing masters. I spent 1 year to do experiments in developmental biology laboratory. And I love attending biology conferences too, in particular developmental biology conferences. And all of these, like the experience of interacting with working scientists always helped me think about philosophical ideas. So yeah, that's one thing I want to highlight about doing philosophy of science in general.
Great. Yeah, I think especially for grad students, applying to conferences seems a bit scary or daunting because maybe they haven't applied to that many or they're not sure which ones to apply to, and they feel a bit alone in the writing process because they don't have other people to kind of provide that feedback. So I think that was some really great advice you had there. So last thing, is there anything you want to say to a student or just any final remarks?
Sorry, the connection was a bit unstable, so I was not able to hear what you said.
Sorry about that. I was just going to ask if you had any final remarks, either about your paper or to students, or just any final comments.
Nothing specific I can think of. So nothing to add to the previous comments I've made.
Okay, perfect. All right, well, I will talk to you, or thanks for letting us interview you. It was a pleasure to interview and like talk and listen to what you had to say, especially about your paper. I think that's really interesting. So
thank you for your time, and it was nice virtually meeting you.
Definitely. All right, thank you.
Thank you.